Hello and welcome. I'm Carol Cram, host of the Art and Fiction podcast. This episode features Barbara Stark-Nemon, the author of Isabela's Way, listed in the Textile Arts category on Art in Fiction. Barbara Stark-Nemon is the author of award-winning novels Even in Darkness, Hard Cider, and Isabela's Way. She has degrees in English literature, art history, and speech-language pathology from the University of Michigan, and worked with deaf and language-disabled children. Barbara lives, writes, cycles, swims, does fiber arts and gardens in Ann Arbor and Northport, Michigan. Welcome to the Art and Fiction podcast, Barbara.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So your novel, Isabela's Way, is a unique take on the Inquisition in the early 17th century in Europe. So can you share with us your inspiration for Isabela's Way?
So this is my third novel, and both my other novels are based in family or personal stories. But Isabela came to me literally out of thin air. I was in the mountains in Portugal on a bicycle ride from Lisbon to the Alhambra in Granada, Spain, all the way through Andalusia. It was right at the beginning of the bike ride. I had been to a Celtic standing stone circle and had huffed and puffed my way up there. And on the way down, Isabela came to me fully formed as a character. And that was pretty mind blowing. That had never happened to me in my writing career at all. And so I didn't think of her. She actually came in. But at that point, I was still writing Even in Darkness. I knew I had hard cider in the pike. And I just said, you need to wait. And she did. I knew that my maternal grandmother's family had escaped Portugal and gone to Hamburg, Germany to escape the Inquisition. I knew that that had happened in the 16th or 17th century. I didn't know who that person was or anything about it, but that's the only connection that I had other than this kind of spiritual experience in a Celtic standing stone circle, after which Isabela jumped into my head.
Was that the stone circle near Évora in Portugal?
It is.
The
It is.
Almec, I believe it's called.
It is, yes. Not many people know that. The notion is that when the sun rises, it comes right through the entrance, and there's a mountain on the other side, which, by the way, I was going to have to climb on my bicycle the next day. And as you greet the sun, you're meant to greet your ancestors. And so perhaps that's part of where this girl popped into my head. We had just come from a town that's known for its rugs, its needle-pointed rugs. So maybe there was that fiber arts connection, but she did just pop into my head on a bicycle as I was gliding down a hill in the early morning in
That's
Portugal.
amazing. I have been to that area. I've been to the stone circles there. It isn't very well known, and it is amazing.
And I didn't know that the Celtic culture had gotten that far south in Europe. I didn't understand
No,
that.
me
I
neither.
really thought it was in Great Britain
Oh,
and
dear.
in a little bit in France and maybe in northern Spain, but I did not know that it had come that far south.
Yes, it is an amazing area, that area around Évora, that you're right, most people don't know about it. So the Inquisition is, such a major part of European history. So what did you learn about the Inquisition and the role of people like Isabela in it, the new Christians?
Vaguely that the Inquisition happened. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. I knew that Ferdinand and Isabella came into power. I knew that they expelled all the Jews and Muslims from Spain. I knew that or they had to convert, or they were killed. Those were the choices.
Yeah.
I knew those basic facts. What I did not know is that the Inquisition was not formally ended until 1837, nor did
Wow.
I know that the Inquisition in an earlier form went way back to the 12th century. So this was a process and a procedure that had its heyday, if you will, during the time of Ferdinand and Isabella. Nor did I know that after people were expelled from Spain, that there was about 100-year period when many conversos, which were converted Jews, and many Jews just simply moved over the border from Spain, that long border, into Portugal. And the Portuguese were very busy running around the world discovering places and finding trade routes. And so they were less interested in persecuting Jews and Muslims. And also, they were using Jews and Muslims in their pursuits and in their travels and in their explorations. And so it was really almost another 100 years before there was a important connection between a prince and a princess of the two countries. And for a short period of time, Spain actually ruled over Portugal. It's the only time Portugal hasn't been independent. And during that time, the condition of that relationship was that the Portuguese would impose the Inquisition more seriously, which they did. And so there was another whole fleeing of persecuted people that happened in the late 1500s and into the early 1600s. And that is the era that my book is set in. So that was all new to me, the length of it and the stages of this.
So, how did you get the idea, though, to use embroidery as the way for Isabella to get across Europe?
Like I said, she came to me as an embroideress, and I didn't embroider previously. I do a lot of other fiber arts, and I've been interested. One of my previous books features a lot of knitting. So it's not that I wasn't interested, so that kind of makes sense. But I did not know much about embroidery, certainly not about early 17th century embroidery. But that's the way she came to me. And so I did a tremendous amount of research and learned a lot. And I actually embroidered the cover of the book as a way of teaching myself what it is that Isabella was doing with her hands, and found that it was a wonderful experience to be able to actually be doing what my character is doing. And I had a brilliant cover designer,
It's a
and
beautiful cover.
show and tell
Yes.
here.
Yeah, that's, I see it.
And so there are a lot of things, a lot of symbols that she uses that I learned to embroider.
That's a good segue because I was intrigued by the symbols that she did embroider. How did you choose those? Like, where did those come from?
So I did a ton of research as to both Christian symbolism, Jewish symbolism in fiber arts. I looked at a lot of tapestries and read a lot and spent a lot of time in museums all over Spain, Portugal, France, and even into Germany. There's a wonderful book by Claire Hunter that I used. She's just an amazing scholar of embroidery. She lives in Scotland, and I was very, very grateful that she was willing to read the manuscript, and she wrote a wonderful endorsement. And she just wrote a tremendous amount about the development of embroidery over time, and particularly about the use of embroidery to symbolize things. So I chose symbols that, the lion in Judaism, it's the Lion of Judah, which is a symbol of strength, and it became actually a symbol in Christianity as well for
Yes.
Jesus. And the pomegranate is a symbol of fertility and of growth. The iris is a symbol of loyalty. I mean, I learned about, and then I learned about all these symbols and incorporated them. And then there are different colors that represent different symbols and different communications. And Claire Hunter just did an amazing job of describing all of this. Here is my embroidery of the book cover.
That's so beautiful. Oh my
And
goodness.
it was a labor of love. Like I said, I had never done embroidery before, but I do other fiber arts. And it was a wonderful opportunity to feel what my character, I needed to sort of finish it by my book launch. And so I felt like the pressure that my character felt to get things done, to be able to communicate with her needlework. So that was a really fun aspect of writing this book.
Yeah, I do think as an author, it is a great idea to do the thing that your characters are doing. Like I took singing lessons for my latest novel, which is called The Choir. I don't
The
sing,
choir, right?
but I thought, well, I should at least kind of feel what it feels like to sing, even if what comes out isn't all that good. But the idea of the breathing and all that. So yeah, that's a wonderful tip actually to other authors is to do what your characters do as much as you possibly can, considering we write historical fiction.
Well, and it's that experiential learning that I
Yes.
think informs any good fiction, whether it's historical or otherwise. And I feel really very fortunate that I was able to do the kind of traveling that I've done to research. And because it's sensory, it gives you the tastes, the sounds, the smells of the environment, even if it's 400 years later.
Yes. I was going to ask you about traveling because you have so many places in this novel, many of which I've also visited because I travel a lot as well. So
I
talk a little bit
did.
more about the traveling and how that helped.
So it began with that bicycle trip that I described. That was my introduction to Portugal, where I completely fell in love with, again, being able the taste, the sounds, the people. At that time, had no idea I would be writing a book about. At the time, I was writing a book about family story that happened in northern Germany. But I really loved Portugal, and this girl popped into my head, and I just said, "You need to wait." But I was able to make two more trips, and I actually did travel the routes that all of my characters take from Portugal through Spain into France to Germany, from northeastern Spain through France and then into Germany, into northern France and then into Germany. And so I really, really got a sense and was able to describe and to
Yeah.
utilize the settings, the various cities, the various countrysides. Some of it I did on bicycle, most of it was by car or walking, but
Mhm.
each place I found a center in and was able to take notes. And I do a lot of photography, so I took
Mhm.
a ton of pictures
Yeah.
and was able to use them and kind of rely on those impressions and those sensory details in the book.
It really does help, doesn't it, to be able
Yes,
to travel to the places. I know there's a very great sense of place in your novel, even though it takes place in a lot of different places. You managed to capture the flavor of each of the places that they went to. Now, David and his sisters take the boat, right, from Lisbon, is it Lisbon or Figueres, up to
figures.
Bayonne, Figueres de
Yes.
Foz. I love, by the way, I mean, no one's ever heard of Figueres de Foz,
No.
but we've been there several times because we have friends there. So
Oh
it's
my
like,
goodness.
oh my
Okay.
goodness, Figueres. Yeah, isn't that funny?
Oh, that's fun. That's
Yeah.
terrific.
Did you do
These
that? Did you take the boat?
I did not. I mean, I am a sailor. I've done a lot of sailing, but I've never sailed down there. But I knew that many, many, many people who fled Portugal went by boat. So Amsterdam, Hamburg, Venice were the three
Right.
cities in Europe that were more tolerant of Jewish or conversos to establish themselves as they escaped the Iberian Peninsula. But most of the people who fled went to the New World, or and that included South America, North America, or even into North Africa. So, and they went by boat because that was the predominant form of transportation. And the Portuguese were great navigators. They put a lot of their resources into shipping and exploration, and so they had that avenue available to them. But I
Yes.
posited that there had to have been overland
Yeah.
escapes also, even though I could not find hard evidence. The only hard evidence that I found for a network of safe houses like I describe in the book was a century earlier. A really interesting businesswoman who did establish a network that sort of funneled people to Venice. I did find evidence of that, but not in the century that I wrote about. But we do have evidence that there were many, many Jews and conversos who ended up in Amsterdam, Hamburg, and Venice.
So you found out that the concept of them going through and having safe houses was at least plausible, which, as historical novelists is kind of all we need to get started, isn't it? Could
Yes.
it happen? It could have happened.
Yes. Yes. Well, and I love, your interview with Mark Baker, in which he says the farther back you go, the more permission you have to make things up. So I
Yeah.
thought that's an interesting concept. I like that concept.
Well, it's true. Yeah, exactly. As long as it's plausible, you want to get the big facts right, but there's a
Yes.
lot of scope for the imagination, as Anne
Yes.
of Green Gables would have said.
Yes. Thank goodness.
Yes. So I want to talk a little bit about Anna, which is another character in the novel that I really liked, and she's a healer. So you frequently mention herbal remedies. So what kind of research did you do for that? Because it sounded very realistic.
I did do a lot of research. Some of your listeners and viewers might laugh, but I read and took notes on the entire Outlander series
Oh,
because there is a wealth of well documented information about herbs used for healing that the main character there had to use, even though she had modern medicine training. She was, time traveling. And so I did a lot of research, and then I found 17th century herbals in England that I read about because I figured, what's known in England might be known elsewhere. And I did do a lot of study of,
yeah.
and I'm interested. I'm a gardener. I raise a lot of herbs, and you know, here in my northern environment. But I wanted her to be not just a dye maker, which of course would connect her more with the whole fiber arts thing,
Yeah.
but I wanted her to be this healer, both for the metaphoric sense, because she is so important to what happens to Isabella, but also because it ups the ante of danger, of particularly a
Yes.
woman
Yeah.
who had those skills was always at risk, and particularly during the Inquisition, of being thought to be a witch and therefore come under scrutiny. And so I needed her to have that skill set and that power and that strength and that usefulness to put everybody in peril with it.
Yes, that was very clever because it was true. Smart women were a was the word. Ah,
It was a
well,
liability.
Yes.
To be
Yeah.
smart and to be a healer and
Yeah.
to be a woman was a liability.
It was back then, and maybe it still is. I don't know. So, it's a hard question. I know as an author, I would have a hard time answering. What do you have a favorite character in your book, and why?
You picked her. You picked her.
Ah, Susanna. Yes, I wondered
Anna
about
Martel
that.
Durandi is my favorite. And I thought, that's not very nice. I mean, your main character needs to be your favorite character. I love Isabella,
Oh, yes.
but Anna is far and away my favorite character.
Well, why would that be, do you think? I liked her too.
Precisely because of her skill sets,
Yes.
about the fact that she works out of the box. She does
Mhm.
not operate as, I mean, she's, gone through a lot. She's suffered a lot, but I kind of feel like, her wingspan is covering and protecting and healing and all those positive aspects. She just appealed to me. And physically, she appealed to me. She's a little too tall. She's
Yeah.
a little too old. And yet she's a woman of power and of grace. And I just fell in love with her.
And I think as modern readers, we like to read about characters like that in history because they existed. We
Yes,
didn't invent strong women, right? So women
right.
like that definitely were around, and I think we like to read them. We don't like to always read, the women were victims because, they were not.
And it seems to me that you've done that in your books, that you have featured strong women and focused in that way. And all three of my books do that same thing.
Well, yes, because I think as women, we know women have always been an incredible force in the world. Just because they didn't have political power, they certainly had power in different ways. So I
Yes,
love to read historical novels that, I mean, without being anachronistic, because, that yes, there were constraints on women, but
yes,
women found a way,
they
as
did. They
Anna
always
does.
do.
They always do. So, was there a particular scene that was especially rewarding for you to write in the novel?
Oh man, there were several that I really loved. I think one of my favorite scenes is early in the novel when Anna Martel is visiting the man who is kind of pulling the marionette strings
Right.
in Portugal to get people out in the nascent days of establishing this network. And he's the one that's in contact with the people in Hamburg and
Mhm.
elsewhere with, the network hasn't existed. And she's sitting outside in his garden, and they're trying to decide if they're going to recruit Isabella. He is for sure that they are. They want to recruit her to do her very skilled embroidery to create banners and headscarves and other items to signify safety, trust, or danger, distrust for homes and for people. And he believes that they can't, she Anna is feels responsible for this young woman. And mind you, 14-year-olds in the 17th century were considered young adults. They were
Oh,
not
yeah.
children. We
Mhm.
consider a 14-year-old a child, but she's a young adult. She's
Mhm.
not that experienced. She's just suffered the loss of her mother, her father's off trying to establish a new life for them elsewhere. And she's basically on her own, except for her friend David. And it's Anna's job to decide whether she's going to kind of permit this recruitment. And that scene takes place in the garden outside this man's house. And Anna just is looking at all the plants. She's smelling lavender from down the hill. It's this very sensory but very deep moment, and it's pivotal for her. Once she makes that choice, then she has to be on board, and the rest of the story has to find its way.
Yes, because it was a pretty major choice that she made because she's putting
Yes,
Isabella in danger.
yes, she agrees to that.
Yeah.
And I kind of loved that scene.
Oh, good. Fantastic. So would you like to do a reading for us from the novel?
Sure. I thought that I would just read the first couple of pages to give listeners a sense of language and what this is about. So this is from chapter 1 in Abrantes, Portugal in June of 1605. Uninterrupted life is like a tapestry, begun, then cast aside, and picked up again in a year's time. The new stitches must work with the old. They will never match exactly, for the hand that stitches them is no longer the same, but the true artist holds the memory of what the silk seeks to bring to life and makes it whole. That's a quote from Rumi. Though she hadn't sewn a single stitch, Isabella cradled a fine linen pouch in her lap, only her mind's eye seeing the profusion of embroidered birds and flowers soon to cover the sacred bag. Her own mother had embroidered the priest's stole that would rest within this burse. It was the 1st of June, and the piece needed to be finished by mid-July in time for Saint Isabella's feast day. The newly renovated church would require decorated bags for altar cloths, vestments, chalices, ciboria, and cruets. And while Isabella had helped her mother stitch for 3 years now, this commission was her first solo piece. Thoughts of her mother brought a familiar, painful seizing at Isabella's center, and she squeezed her eyes shut against the threat of tears and the sorrow of her loneliness. 3 long months had passed since the death of Mariam Yesharoun de Castro Nunez in this very room. Isabella cast her eyes to the back of the small but well-appointed space, with its tall cupboards stocked with textiles, silk and gold and silver thread, the materials from which the de Castro Nunez family created their famous embroidery. Her mother had contracted the fever that had swept through Abrantes during the spring. The dreaded red rash had first appeared on her hands and feet, then turned a horrible black, and in 3 days' time, following the buboes on her neck, her armpits and groin, the headache, the belly pain, the confusion, and the final horror of blood and vomit, Isabella's mother had succumbed, leaving the 14-year-old girl alone and devastated. How she had wished to be taken as well, but Isabella remained healthy even as the plague afflicted surrounding households. João de Souza, the magistrate of the new Christian community, had assisted Isabella in arranging for the swift burial of her mother, only to fall ill himself and yield his life to the fever within a week. Immediately following his passing, his son David, though only 18 years of age, had assumed his father's role, caring as well for his mother and 2 younger sisters. The epidemic, which had continued to ravage the community in the months that followed, had abated only recently. The previous winter, Gabriel de Castro Nunez had journeyed to Germany, seeking to conduct his business in that new market as restrictions on his textile trade in Portugal increased. In his absence, Isabella had assisted her mother, but now she worked on her own. She had no brother, no uncle, no relatives at all in Abrantes. Until her father returned, it would be up to her to keep the business alive. She reached to the floor for her delicately painted sewing basket with its silk drawstring bag, a birthday gift from her mother, then drew her chair into the light of the open door. How different the dry, sun-drenched cobbles looked this morning. Last evening, the Rue de Capitão Correio de la Cerda had been deluged with rain and red dirt from the surrounding fields ebbing away. Evening noises were muffled by the soft plinking of raindrops on stone and dust. The scent of wet earth had replaced the stench of waste as rainwater washed the ruin of the day down the hill. This morning was fair, and Isabella set to her task. She outlined the border on the linen envelope with long satin stitches in the vibrant blue often used in depictions of Santa Isabela, her namesake. Next, she carefully drew out gold thread and began to couch the blue, giving it dimension and elegance. Isabela de Castro Nunez, shouted a voice from the top of the road near the castle gate. Isabela's hand froze mid-stitch. The songbirds flitting among the blooming tilia trees ceased their calls as if alert to impending danger. A summons by an official from town or castle never boded well for New Christians. Only weeks earlier, the physician Abrail de Medellin had been detained after months of tending to the plague-stricken of Abranches. When he'd returned to his home many days later, his gaunt visage and silence had terrified Isabela. There were whispered charges that Jews and New Christians were to blame for the deadly fever sweeping the land. Even as the supply of goods from New Christian merchants fed and clothed the townspeople, those same businesses were harassed and taxed unduly. But who would be interested in Isabela?
Ah, good way to start it off. Yes, I remember that introduction. It was great. So thank you for that reading. Is there anything else that you'd like people to take away from reading this novel?
I believe there are a couple of things. One thing is, when I started writing this book, I had no idea how the world, and in our country in particular, would change with regard to the plight of refugees.
Mm.
My own family, my parents were both refugees from Nazi Germany. I spent 15 years of my life working for our local agency that resettles all refugees in Washtenaw County and where I live. So it's in my DNA, and it's, in my passion as a person. I had no idea when this girl came to me. I knew she had to flee. I knew she'd be a refugee, but my world, my understanding of the politics around it and the horror of what's happened in my own country is very different than when I started writing this book. So that's one thing that really changed from the beginning to the end of writing this book. The other thing is that the theme that runs through all my work is we really cannot choose what comes at us. We are not in control, and it's often unwelcome when things appear. All we can control is how we respond, how we recruit resilience, how we find and access allies, and how we help others. And those are themes that run through all of my work, and they're what I'm hoping will inspire people about Isabela.
Yes, because part of the novel, well, the main core of the novel is her journey, isn't it? From a young girl almost, to someone who has to stand up for herself. So,
Yes.
yeah, someone has to learn to respond to what's come at her with strength rather than giving in.
Yes, exactly.
So, one of my goals with the Art and Fiction podcast is to inspire other authors. So, what's one thing you've learned from writing this novel in particular that you didn't know before about writing, as opposed to, about the research?
So my first two novels are based in my first novel very closely on a family story. My second novel, I call it a what if novel. What if things that happened to me in my life had turned out very differently? But this novel, as I said, this girl popped into my head with no previous thought and so I had to really research her. I had to develop her story entirely as, fictionally.
Yeah.
And that, that we always get told as writers, write what you know. And so what I had to write of her is what I know as a person, not what I know as a fact or a process or anything like that. And that was it was a huge challenge. I mean, it was very different and it was wonderful. So what I learned is to not be frightened of that, but to embrace the challenge of whatever the story is that is knocking at your skull and wanting to get out and not leaving you alone. Embrace the challenge of it. My first response was, no, like, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah.
And I quickly, and again, another real writing process piece. I have a wonderful writers group of, very supportive and talented writers who helped me. And they basically said, oh, no, you've got to write this story. Absolutely, you're going to write this story. And so, again, that's metaphoric of, making use of your allies and building on strengths, build on what you know and what you can do and embrace the challenge. Don't resist it.
Yes, as they say, do what scares you. Just
Yeah.
don't just do what's going to be easy. And I think that advice about write what you know really is not good advice. I mean, come on.
Well, I think we do start with that,
Yes.
but we shouldn't be limited to that.
No, no, not at all. Because one of the great things about writing is that voyage of discovery that you go on as an author, and then hopefully your
Yes.
readers go on it too. But the core of it is what you're doing, every day as you sit down to write. You don't know what's going to happen. I like that part.
Well, and that's, when I think about my life as an author, which, as I said, is an encore career, that is, in fact, the great joy of it,
Mhm.
that I did not anticipate. I mean, it was a bucket list item to write a novel. I did not anticipate the joy and the growth and um, those two things that would come as a result of it.
Yes. I think joy is a very important word there. There is a lot
Yes,
of joy to be gotten, despite the fact that it's not an easy thing to do. It's a very challenging thing to do, but there is a
yes,
lot of joy involved as well.
I agree.
So, what are you working on now, or can you share that with us?
This is the first time in 25 years that I have not had a novel knocking
Oh,
inside my head. However, I have two writing projects, one based on a family cookbook and one based on a trove of letters that I discovered in my parents that something is going to emerge from them. I don't know that it's another book, but we'll see. But I'm planning to explore that. I'm in the middle of a book launch right now and
yeah.
in and out of town. So, and trying to do a lot of presentations and so forth. So I'm giving myself a little time to just work on all of that. But those are the two projects that I have in mind.
Oh, fantastic. Good. Yeah, no, this is the time just to focus on this novel, getting this out into the
Yes,
world, isn't it? Yeah.
exactly. And this is not something that I knew about, again, as an encore career author. I did not understand how much was involved on the backside
Yeah,
of writing a book.
I know. Yeah, the writing is the least bit. No, that's not true. The writing
Yeah,
is the hardest part, but there is a lot involved, isn't there?
a lot involved. I've learned a lot.
But it's been a fun journey.
It has. It's been wonderful. It's been very fulfilling.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me, Barbara. This has just been great.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate your whole art and fiction effort, the website and the podcast and everything. It's a wonderful literary citizen effort. And I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
I've been speaking with Barbara Stark-Nemon, the author of Isabela's Way, listed in the Textile Arts category on Art and Fiction at www.artandfiction.com. Be sure to check the show notes for a link to Barbara's website at www.barbarastarknemon.com. If you are enjoying the Art in Fiction podcast, please help us keep the lights on by making a donation to the Ko-fi website at www.ko-fi.com/artinfiction. Also, please follow Art in Fiction on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to give the Art in Fiction podcast a positive review or rating wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much for listening.